In this video, we're going to discuss menu parameters. Now, if we dive inside this control point OTL, you'll notice that I left this sphere here. Now, we could just delete it and force them to use a box, or delete the box and force them to use a sphere. But in the case of guide geometry, sometimes we would like to just let the users pick whichever guide geometry is most convenient for them. So what we could do is just have a toggle in there that says turn it on, it uses a sphere, turn it off, uses a box. But what if we have three things? Say we want to have a sphere, a box, and a circle. In that case, it's a little bit more complicated to use the types of parameters that we've discussed so far. Fortunately, Houdini allows us to create menus. To create a menu, we just go back to the Type Properties dialog. And let's just go ahead and add a folder for our menu. And we'll call it Guides. And hit Apply. And now you'll notice that it created this empty folder for us. Okay, so in Houdini, you can make a menu out of really any parameter type, or at least most of them. We're going to start off by looking at menus for string parameters. So if we drag a string, and in order to make sure that it actually ends up inside the folder, make sure that the font turns white. Because if you'll notice, if I just put it underneath and hit apply, you'll notice that it just puts it underneath all of the folders. So you have to drag it onto the guides folder to put it inside, and hit apply, and now it's inside there. So now, if we go to the menu tab, to turn this parameter into a menu, all we have to do is check use menu. And now if we hit apply, you'll notice that I have an empty menu here. So the way this works is we add menu items here. And then we can select the type of menu here, and we'll look at the types of menus a little bit later. For now, if you see here, there's actually two fields here. The first field is, you could think of it as the parameter, or of the menu item. So this is basically what the menu is going to evaluate to if it's a string. So if we put something like spam there, and then we put something different for the label, let's say blorg, and then hit apply, you can see that there's a blorg here. But now if we evaluate this parameter, it'll actually evaluate to spam. So let's just test this. Let's create a null sop. And we'll click on the gear here and go to edit parameter interface. And let's just go ahead and add a string parameter to there and hit accept. And then what we're going to do with this string parameter is we're just going to channel reference our menu. Actually, let's do it on this one. So we're going to channel reference our menu here. So if we right click on that and say copy parameter, go back to our null, right click, and paste copied relative references. So something that I'd like you to notice is that if we middle click on our label here, it actually says default.pick. And if we go back to our control point OTL, it very clearly says blorg. So why is that? Well, notice that if I uncheck use menu here and hit apply, it is actually set to default.pick. This is actually the default value of the parameter. And this is something that's a bit annoying about the way that Houdini handles menu parameters. What is displayed on the menu parameter is not necessarily what the menu parameter will evaluate to. In fact, it won't necessarily evaluate to anything in the menu at all. It can be anything. And if you set it to something other than, or if you set it to something that's not an actual menu item, Houdini will just sort of freak out and leave the menu on the same item that was last displayed. There are a couple of different ways to sort of elegantly handle this. But what we're going to do for now is just go back to channels and change the default here. And we'll change it to the first menu item that we have, let's say spam. So if we go back to the menu tab and make sure we have use menu checked on, and hit apply now. Alright, so let's see what it evaluates to now. If we go back to our null sop and middle click on label, now it evaluates to spam. Notice that it's evaluating to spam and not blorg. This is why I said that you can think of this field as the name of the menu item, and this field as the label of the menu item. So essentially, we're naming it spam, and that's what it's going to return, and then what it's going to display to the user is blorg. Alright, so how do we add a second menu item? Well, we just click on the next field down here. We could add something like egg for the name, and fawn for the label, and hit apply. So now if it's set to blorg, it will evaluate to spam, and if we set it to fawn, it'll evaluate to egg. And if we go back to our null SOP, we can see, if we refresh it, set it to fawn, it is in fact now evaluating to egg. So now let's just take a quick look at the different types of menus and how we would actually use them. So if we select our control point again, just so that we can see the effects of what we're doing, we can change the menu type here with this pull down menu. So by default, it's set to normal menu only single selection, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically it just means it's a menu and you can only pick one thing at a time. If we set it to normal mini, which is mini menu only single selection, and then hit apply, you'll notice that it's just this tiny, and if we click it, it still has these. But when we select menu items, it doesn't actually update any text on the interface. This can be useful if you have another parameter that you need to set values to, or if you have just commands in here that you want to run. The next menu type is replace field plus single selection menu. If we hit apply on that one, now suddenly we have this text field, but we also have a little pull down menu here. So if we click on this, you'll notice that when I say fawn, it sets the text field to egg, and when I say blorg, it sets the text field to spam, which again, that's the name of each menu item. This can be extremely useful if you need users to be able to just pick whatever they want, or if you want users to be able to just enter some text in here, but you don't necessarily care what they're going to put in there. But you might want to have defaults, and they can pick that from this menu. One of the most common ways to use this is to keep a running list of directories that someone's entered into a parameter, and then you can just put it down here and pick old directories. The last type of menu is toggle field plus multiple selection menu. If we select that and hit apply, it looks the same, but it's actually not. So if we pull this down now and we pick fawn, instead of changing it to egg, it just adds egg onto the end. And if I just go over here and say blorg, it actually removed spam. So the reason why it did that is because if you notice here it says toggle. So basically what it's going to do is it allows users to pick from a drop down and add and remove things. So if I put spam back in there, and then I remove egg. Now note that if spam is actually in the list of items in this parameter, no matter how many times it's in there, so if I say spam, 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 blorg, egg, egg, no matter how many times it's in there, it's going to remove all of them. So if I do blorg, which corresponds to spam, you'll notice that it removes all of them. And if I say fawn, it removes both eggs, and then blorg will never go away. So when would you ever use this? Well, this can be useful for when you have a situation where you have a bunch of default items and you need users to be able to pick multiple items out of the list. Usually you don't want duplicates in that case, so Houdini's actually making it a toggle. So let's take a look at how to actually use this to control our OTL. So if we just go ahead and delete this null SOP now. Now, if you remember when we were setting up this enable color checkbox, the way that we made that control our system, if we dive inside, was we added a switch SOP here. And also, if you remember, switch SOPs take any number of inputs, and you can just pick which input that you want it to output with this parameter. So what we would really like to do is do something similar for box, sphere, and let's even just add circle here, so that we have all three different types of guide geometry. So if we add a switch swap, and I'm just going to hit cancel on this type properties dialog, we can just wire the switch swap in, and let's just go ahead and display the guide out null so that we can tell what we're doing. So you notice that it's a box right now. Wire in the sphere to input 1, wire in the circle to input 2. Now the ordering of inputs on this is very important, because if you remember, this is the order in which this parameter controls it. So if I set it to 1, it grabs input 1, which is the sphere. So if I had the sphere plugged into after the circle, then Houdini would actually pick the circle instead of the sphere. So we need to make sure that they're all in here in order. So let's just name this switch guides. And now you can see that I can switch between the three different types of guide geometry by just changing this parameter. So now what we need is to link this parameter to something up on the interface. So if we come back out to explosions, go to type properties, let's go ahead and delete our menu here. And we will add an integer. Again, make sure you drop it on top of the guides folder so that it goes inside. Let's go back to the parameter tab and just name it something like select guide. We'll use select guide as the label. And hit apply. Now if we go to guides, we have the select guide parameter. Let's go ahead and accept for now. And then just go inside our control point OTL and make an expression which links up to that. So ch / select guide, there it is. Close quotes, close parentheses. Nothing changes for now, but if we come back out, and let's just go ahead and display this guy. Now if we change this one, we get our guide geometry. Alright, so let's go ahead and make a menu out of this. So if we go to our type properties dialog, select our integer parameter here, and go to menu, we can turn on use menu. And in this case, we just want to have the normal type of menu, because we only want to have one selection. And we don't want them to be able to just enter any number. So now if we hit apply, we get our nice empty menu. Now in the case of integer parameters, it doesn't actually really matter what we put in here. We could put anything, but I like to put what it's actually going to evaluate to. So if we put 0 there, and then put as a label maybe box was the first one, and then we can put 1 for this one, sphere was the second one, and then 2 for this one, and circle. So why doesn't this matter? Well, the so-called name of the menu item really only matters for string menus. So if I put 0 here, it's actually going to be ignored. So if I hit apply, you'll notice that we now have all of our options here. And if we hit accept again, now when we change this to sphere, it becomes a sphere. When we change it to circle, it becomes a circle. Or if we change it back to box again, it becomes a box again. So let's just dive back inside and set the display flag back to out. And come back out again. And do save operator type. And now we have our nice guide geometry here with the box. And we can change the guide geometry by just selecting from the menu.